The Marazion Memories Reminiscences Project made more than 80 recordings throughout 2005 and 2006. The voices you are about to hear tell some of the stories we recorded, and all are edited sections of longer conversations. We are grateful to everyone who contributed. Conducting the recordings are Jane Howells, Anne Main, Sheila Berriman, Joan Howells, and myself, John Pollard.
And these you ought to put down in a book, didn't it? These are all genuine stories.
Yeah.
You know, if only people would only have put them down at the time. Like.
During the war, were you able to keep a bullet back for your
own?
No.
We could keep a pig back.
Yes. Did you do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And did you have inspectors round in the war?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Well, he was a local man. He was down at Hale, I think.
Yes.
We used to issue the permits.
Yes.
You're allowed to have one
Yes.
a year or two.
Yes.
Could have been two.
Yes, I see. Mm.
So, you know, there was a lot of jiggery pokery.
And how many did you have?
No, I thought I wouldn't do anything like that. But some of them, you know, sort of like, word got out that somebody had killed a pig in 3 or 4 of them.
Yes.
So this chap came up with a policeman and searched his premises. They found a pig in the piano.
In the piano?
And the headlines in the local paper was "The Musical Pig" or something.
You know, but you talking also about killing, because Father he went with Cara Roberts up to Nancy Gollan as a butcher after the First World War, and he used to go out on the pony and track with him, and when he came home, and of course sometimes we used to kill. Mm-hmm. And I remember being put up the lane, and there was a little house up there, and they killed a pig. And of course half of it wasn't got rid of, and the inspector was coming down, and they put it up in the bed with the old woman. you see, these days you don't get anything like that, you see. And of course they daren't go up there, you see, it was put up in the bed. And I was up in the lane watching. But we used to have all the police down, they used to come, all the top ones had cream, you name it, they had it.
Yeah, they were just,
yes.
Worse than the ones
They were right in it, all of them, all the top ones. Yeah. And then one night we had Father used to kill, and we had a kind of a barn made out of straw bales and what have you. And one of the workmen went down there, and the inspector was shut in there all night. They'd shut him in. All this went on. Oh no, you look at it now, you look back, you know, and it was a great life then, although I was only small. We enjoyed it.
Heard about the wine that washed up all along, haven't you?
Yeah, we tried some.
Yeah, no.
Horrible, wasn't it?
It was not matured, you see. It was being taken somewhere to be treated and matured, you know. My dear mother was alive. Of course she was. And I had 2 little milk churns, and I had one of white and one of red wine up in the hayloft.
Oh, lovely.
This is absolutely true. And I used to take some sugar over to make it a bit more palatable.
Yes. It was horrible stuff. That's before the war, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, way back before the war. And I remember going in and sitting on the kitchen table, and that was before we had electricity in Marazion.
Yes.
And there was an Aladdin lamp, you know, on the kitchen table. And I thought that lamp was coming towards me. And my mother was crying. She said, "You win the wine, didn't you?" I said, "No, I just took some over from the men." God, I was ill. I was really ill.
Where?
I fell off the table.
Oh dear.
And Father dragged me out to the drains to get on with it.
Oh, that taught you.
I had to go and see the doctor afterwards,
Right,
you know.
That
he said, "You've
you.
nearly poisoned yourself, man."
Yes.
Drinking it like that. They used to say in those days, even the children are going down glassy-eyed.
I know, I can just remember, we had it in the flower house, and I can just remember tasting some, but I don't think anybody liked it. I think everybody was very disappointed, weren't they?
Yeah, I was. Very disappointed.
We were
allowed to kill 2 calves and 2 pigs a year.
Right.
And used to be, because when we were allowed to kill 1 pig, we used to kill about 4.
You're exaggerating.
Well, 2 or 3.
Never get away with 4.
2 or 3.
Where could we put them all?
Who was the inspector then?
Mr. Turner, he was from where? Falmouth. Anyway, we had this permit to kill
He was Ministry of Agriculture.
to kill 2
Food,
calves a
Ministry of
year.
Agriculture, food.
And we killed 1 calf, and it's hung up, wasn't it? In the cart house they used to do that. And about 5 o'clock the next morning, I know there's a knock on the door, and Father said, "Go down, Joe, and see who it is." So he said who he was. He said, "I want to see your permit." So I was sort of casual about it. And I said, "Why don't some man want to see a permit, Dad?" So he said, "I don't know where it is, in the desk, have a look." So I couldn't find it. He was waiting on the thing. So anyway, eventually found it. So he was absolutely furious. He said, "Well, I've been informed that you killed a calf without any permit." So I said, "Well, here's a permit, have a look." I said, "Do you want some liver?" Oh, my dear, he nearly blew me.
Bribe.
The farm was just down 3 or 4 cottages away from where we lived. A farm called Corgreath. It's Corgreath House now. And the farmer was in there, was called John Andrew. John and Polly. They was called John Sharp and Polly Blunt. I don't know why they got that name, I have no idea.
And the milk was straight from the cow?
Yes, we would down with the jug, and sometimes you would go down there and she hadn't finished milking. And I think that's where the Blunt come in, because she would be a bit, well, what shall I say, a bit teasy, have it that way.
Yeah.
And they'd bring a can of milk in, straight from the cow, put them through the strainer.
And there it was.
Yeah, we would have half a pint. Used to make their own cream.
How much was that?
Oh, I don't think it was more than about a penny or 2p a pint. 2p a pint, I expect, for the most. Used to make their own cream. They had beautiful cows, Guernsey cows.
Yeah.
Oh, they was treated like children. And this cream, they would have in great big enamel bowls. And when you opened the door, you could smell cream. People always used to have cream for Sunday.
Yeah.
On Saturdays, you had to take your dish down. And she would weigh up whatever you wanted, a quarter or something.
Right.
Yeah, she was dishing up with her hands.
Really?
Yeah.
We had 3 areas that had shoots in them. One down by Ludgvan Woods, and another one in Blewett's farm. One was in Steve Quick's farm. So you had the 3 shoots.
And what do you mean by a shoot? It was just
a pipe.
A pipe
gushing out lovely spring water. Water. Okay. Beautiful.
Now, you were telling me before about some of the sort of unusual things about Marazion, like the water supply. Can you tell me something about that?
Yes, the water supply originated from a reservoir at Ludgvan. And from Ludgvan it was gravity fed and supplied all Marazion. And the supply actually did just about reach at the top of the mount. And the chief water engineer was Arthur Bennett's a plumber.
And in the 20s and 30s, were there standpipes, or did everybody have water into their houses?
Water in their houses.
Everybody had water in their houses?
As far as I know of,
Okay,
yes.
Sure.
And we paid 7 6 a year water rates.
Ah.
7 6 water rates.
You times that by 100 now, can you? And you're almost there. Yeah.
About pigs being slaughtered,
Yes.
because various ones were, sometimes there was one killed on the quiet,
Yes,
you see,
that's
and
right.
somebody would say, so-and-so, I can't remember his name now, he's on the bout, look out, watch out.
Yeah.
And somebody had put all the bits of bacon on that in a milk jar and put it up with a milk on the milk stand, you see.
Really? Yeah.
While he was around having a scout around the farm, milk lorry
It was
came.
hit. Oh, I took this.
So they had to chase the milk lorry, get down, and then get a driver.
Yeah, a bit of pork. There were lots of tales. I know Father killed. They were killing one pig, and it was illegal. You know, we'd all had our ration of it.
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, quick! Shut the gate and keep the noise out."
And when the war's on too, I'll tell you what else we done. And you're going to believe this. You used to go up the Fox's Lane, what we call. Go up the big quarry up the top there, what the Leahy family dug it years ago to build out the barn in Tallock Farm.
That's not Clay Lane.
Well, we call it Clay Lane if you want to. It's straight up.
Same one.
Same one. Then you end up down by Thomas Ladas and come back down the road.
We call it Clay Lane.
Yeah.
Oh, the quarry, yes.
Yeah, up with there's a quarry up there.
There is.
Yeah, big quarry up there, where the badges sets are. Now we've gone up there when the war's on. The sets was up there then, all the way up through there, up through there. Early in the mornings, wait for the badges to come back.
Oh.
Now and please know who played this. Shoot them for food.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, they say badger ham is delicious.
Delicious, it's like pork. And Father used to make me go in. Yes.
It takes a bit of shooting though, badger.
No, you wait for them to come back to the set, see, and as they come back to the set, you shoot them in the head. You don't want to shoot their body because you're on them, the flesh on them. So you mustn't run the flesh
Shoot
on.
them head on.
Shoot them aside the head, or not really. We want to catch them aside the head.
Because they got their skulls are very thick.
Oh yeah, very thick. You catch them and you catch them in the head from their ears and all. You generally kill them. They don't last long.
Did you eat them fresh or did you hang them?
No.
Yeah.
Skin them up there, the lane, skin them on the lane and turn them on our back again.
Yes.
After we shot them. Come home and go into one of the sheds we had home and cut them in pieces. Put them in salt just for a week
Pickle
a bit, and then gradually as you want them, eat them. Because you don't want you can't eat too much badger one time.
No.
You'll get that. You get very too much to your palate.
Yeah.
Every taste.
Yeah.
But the children didn't know what they eat. They didn't know they eating pigs. The younger ones didn't.
Yes, it is a big family.
Yeah.
And you say that quarry stone was used for
the herd of donkeys.
The herd of donkeys. Yeah. Remember them? Crikey, remember they?
No, you're the only one who's really remembered them.
Yeah.
So tell us about them. Yes.
Well, now ever so often they'd be up Zudgeon Downs where the playing fields are now. They'd be up there, mind a lot of gorse and grass in there too late days, doing patches and all. Well, there's bits of patches now, other side of the playing fields up there. A lot of ferns got in them now. And when they eat that out, they just come down the Almanan and on the park, what we call the park, down where that pole was, and there was a good pile of grass down where our land was. And come up around there and eat there for a little while. And then all of a sudden, then they make for Godolphin Hill.
Go on.
Godolphin Hill they used to make for. Well, then I believe then once when the cars got thicker, people started to scatter down a few. Then I suppose RSPCA got fed up with this and they had them rounded up. Well, about 40, 50 donkeys.
Really?
Yeah, 40, 50 donkeys, yeah, I remember.
Really?
Yeah, because we used to chase them because they tried coming into our garden down there. And we used to drive them away from there and all that.
And this was just after the war or during the war? Or?
This is after the mines closed down. Oh, this is for the war.
Oh, before the war?
Yeah, for the war.
Really?
Yeah, for the war, down in, say, in 1935, 36, 37, 38.
I can't remember seeing them.
No, that's funny,
Were
isn't
you
it?
ever tempted to catch it?
How early did you have a telephone, Mary? I mean, the 40s or 30s?
No, wait a minute. Well, I just think about the beginning, end of the 30s and the beginning of the 40s.
So Dad could do his business then on the phone?
Yeah. That was our grandfather. Of course, he didn't like all these new things, And we had the telephone then. And it was one Christmas that we had a party. We joined with our friends, Williams and the ladies. And we had the party down the Methodist school. So in the middle of the evening, Dad said to his father, look, I shan't be gone long. He said, I'll walk down and see how they get on at the party. All right. And when he come back, he said, do you know, he said, that old thing been ringing all the time since you've been gone. And I don't like it, he said. I just took it up and said, ring again later, there's nobody home.
There was another fellow that lived down with Lovers to Triscoe, two brothers. One was William John Wilts and the other was Walter Wilts. And Walter was a real character. And someone there asked him, let me see now, Walter, how long has William John, your brother, been dead? He said, I knew him well, I went to school with him. How long has he been dead now? And he replied, if he lived till tomorrow, he'd been dead a fortnight. Another character, I remember a Mr. Jack King and a Mr. Sedgman down at Relubbers he lived, and they used to go around digging wells. And these couple was down there to dig this well, and they fell out, and Mr. Sedgman went home and left Jack King down in the pit, and he left him down there, and I was down there. Could have been just when I left school, I don't know, but I heard this here noise down there shouting, and it was he left down in the pit. And then they had another character up, he was called Mr. William Richards, and he went with a lady. I got family living there, but I doubt whether they would, there's no disrespect. And he went with this lady, must have been 40 year, Miss Skewish, it was up Red Lane. And she's supposed to say to him, William, isn't it about time we got married? He said, who do you think is going to have us now? And these type of things, like, you know.
You were a bit of a singer then?
Oh, I sang all my life. Yeah, I like singing. Yeah.
So you sang at school?
Yeah, sang at school and, well, sang everywhere. I mean, it was all singing down Crowless. Crowless was singing all the time. You went pub, you was singing all night. Then when you get kicked out, from pub, you're outside and sing away again. Yeah. Till 12, 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
That was always, that was. I remember one night down there where we was outside singing and, well, I don't know whether Nichols done it or Miss Hamill or who phoned up any of the police come to stop us. It's 1 o'clock in the morning now, police come stop us. So we walked from the pub across the road where the telephone kiosks are now, and we started again. So the police started coming across the road at us again, so we stopped what we were singing and we sang a national anthem. Over and over and over and over, and kept he in the middle of the bloody road standing up.
Still.
Attention, he was. He couldn't come, could he? As soon as he started making movies.
That's brilliant. Yeah. How many of you then were singing like that?
Oh, you was that 30, 40?
Yeah.
Like that all the time.
Toilets, Reuben. Now I've seen the toilet down that cottage because it's down the bottom of the garden.
That's right. Yeah. And you know, it's funny you say about that. That was a flush toilet when we lived there.
Yeah.
Because, well, see, you weren't far off the sea in any case.
It didn't flush very far.
No, but that have always amazed me, John.
Yeah.
You know, everybody, what we used to call have earth closets, didn't they? We used to call them then. But no, we were privileged to have...
so at the farm, it was an Elsan or an earth closet?
Well, let's say a bucket then.
Bucket, yeah.
A bucket, yes. Yeah.
And you'd have to dump the bucket.
And when my father did.
Cottage, what was that like?
Oh, a sweet little cottage, but only 2 bedrooms, but then it was big enough. But of course, no electric, no water.
This is 1945, no electric, no water.
No. And no water toilets or anything like that. An Elson outside in the garden.
Okay, where was the Elson emptied then?
Well, Father used to see to it, and we never used to take much notice of what went. But,
or where it went.
I think it went back into the land. And that's how...
Good rhubarb.
That's how we had such good crops, I reckon.
And how did Mum cope without any water then? Where did she get her water from?
We had big water butts for using...
rainwater?
Yeah, just the rainwater from the roof. But every day we had to walk down the back lane and down one field to where there was a water wheel and a chute and bring up 2 buckets of water every evening.
Okay, and that was your
for
quota?
Drinking.
Yeah.
That was for drinking.
So it didn't
water.
boil it or anything, it was clean enough?
No, that was lovely, the chute water, you couldn't beat it.
Yeah.
Well, the first council houses, to what I understand, was the ones up Hemver Terrace, where my niece lives now.
Right.
My auntie Bessie lived in those first, and my cousin Johnny went up there eventually, and Mrs. Curtis and all them. They were the very first ones. They were the very first ones, facing the first row, right in the front there.
So the one you moved into, how different was that from the cottage you lived in before?
Oh, tremendously different. We were thrilled to bits. We had a running bath. We could turn the tap on and have a running bath instead of having to carry a bath of water up 7 or 8 steps. My mother did, and emptied it in the sink outside. But and then we bathed in front of a fire. We could only have 1 bath a week in those days.
How did Mum heat the water up in the cottage?
In a boiler. It was one of those big boiler which you did your washing in.
Right. Okay.
And the
so like a Burco boiler.
That boiler was filled with water, and we had a bath in the front room in front of the fire, or in the dining room in front of the fire in the winter.
Because you obviously came here in 1949. You know, how have houses changed?
Well, houses have changed. I remember my grandmother's house. She had a black slab which she used to clean every week, and she loved her slab, but she didn't. When she had her washing, which she used to get up at 5 o'clock to do her washing on a Monday, and outside she had about 4 sets of bricks each side, and a sort of a grill, and she used to light a fire and put a big, heavy, very, very heavy boiler. Water on to boil the clothes, and she used to put that on to boil the clothes. Outside, never indoors.
So
outside.
what was it raining?
Yeah, well, she was always outside. Yes, I don't know. Yeah. But beside that there, she had a big, huge pit where she used to throw all her rubbish. And it was a huge pit. But every bit of rubbish they had, vegetables,
How
whatever.
close was this to the house then?
Wasn't more than about 4 or 5 yards from the house.
And there's a little cottage,
Yeah, a little cottage, yeah, right by the river. And they used to throw all their skins. Everything used to go in this here big thing. They used to make compost, I suppose, for the garden. See, in those days, I don't know. But in my mother's house, which was, we moved from the farm into another place, and then we moved again. And we had a boiler in the what we call the back kitchen. In the corner of the back kitchen, we used to boil our clothes, and used to light the fire underneath it and boil it.
So. The boiler boiled the whites.
Yes, right. Yeah.
And the rest were washed with the washboard.
Yeah, with the washboard.
A block of soap or?
Yes, a green soap. My granny used to have green soap and blueing. Always had a bluing bag to put the whites in afterwards. Sure. Yeah, put them up.
And where did the water come from?
The water they used to take from the river. Take buckets of water from the river to fill it, you see, until it boiled. Yeah.
And then how about drying them? Do you have a mangle or?
I had a mangle. Yeah, that's right. Used to mangle all the clothes out. And mangle the sheets so they didn't need a lot of pressing afterwards, you see. You used to squeeze all the water out there. Yeah, fold them neatly as they've mangled them, and then used to hang them out to dry, yeah.
Now look, I got to tell you about basket making.
Right, go on then.
Willie Moon and his father before him made baskets at Longrock. And the withers, some of them, he imported a lot, but some of them was grown behind Tresco Street. And they come up in clumps, and you'd have like a hook, and you'd cut them on the skew, put them in bundles, take them down. His workshop was in by the river on the beach side, and he had a tank at the end of the building, and he used to put these withers in there to keep them supple. And he had 3 men working for him.
Crikey.
Yeah, 3 men working for him. And then they made baskets there by the hundreds.
You described the basket as a mawn.
Yes, well, a mawn is a 2-handle basket, like people put logs in now, about that high.
Yeah.
A mawn. And then you had teddy baskets, little small ones that you pick up teddies.
So tell me about the box factory. This was part of Monroe's
box factory. There was some factory. Mr. Thorne was the manager, and he lived up in the house that's now Old People's Home.
Okay.
Tolworth House.
So where was the box factory?
Got by the river.
Where Monroe's used to have the...
Yeah. And there was a box factory there. They used to make hundreds and thousands of crates. And I remember I was up in Manchester, and I saw M. Laurie and Son, Varfel Ludgren on a Brockler box. I thought, I wish I was home with M. Laurie, Varfel Farm, up in Manchester.
Where did Mother get her other shoot of supplies? I mean...
Well, just at the local shop. He was called Charlie Williams, and that was just up around the corner from the Institute. And back in those days, I meant the oil lamps. He used to sell everything else. And we never had a wash up, but he would serve butter and cheese, and then go and give you a gallon of paraffin.
Tastes better.
And sweets and that up there as well. Like, we had everything. Tea. I can remember Brookbone Dan come around with a tea delivery with solid wheels, before.
Crikey.
Yeah.
And what about milk and coffee? Where do you get it?
Yeah, well, we had local deliverers of milk. Most of the farms had milk, they used to come round with a churn, and just if you wanted a pint, they just dip it in a pint. And also water. A lot of people in the cottages, right opposite our carpenter shop was a man called Harry Williams, and there again he had troll feet, had shoes specially made, and he had a mule and a big butt, and I used to go to Relubus with him and sell pails of water, a penny a pail, up through Relubus Lane, like, you know.
So where did he get the water?
Well, down at the pump down at Relubus, all running water, just pump it out of the, and never had anybody having any complaints, like, you know.
Where did that come from?
By Tregonnan Hill. Two brothers had thrashing sets up there.
Yeah.
Buckets they were called.
They'd come for early breakfast so that they would get the steam up on the traction engine, get it going, then they'd come in and have a good breakfast.
The driver would do that. The owner, he didn't do a lot of work because we had three of them. One was to look after he would look after the steam engine before tractors was put fast on. And he had to see that steam was kept up. And when they want to put the hose in the water, they would keep the water going and the coal and keep the machines, the thresher machine, oiled and so on. And then you'd have one up top was feed the machine. He was working for the thrashing machine owner.
Yeah.
And one, he would be up and putting the corn in the machine, and then the other one would be at the end with bundles of straws coming out. So that's how it went. But then for carrying the corn away to the barn and building a straw rick and that, the farmer would,
his men would do that.
His men would do that, and he'd have help from his neighbour. Yeah, and then a lot of people, see, they would stack their corn in ricks and thatch it down and leave it there until they wanted it. And then they would
thrash it then?
Right, winter corn, what they call it.
Right, okay.
I tell them I used to have 10 shillings a week, which is 50p, isn't it? Yeah, 50p. I used to be able to go to Goldsmithny,
yes,
walk to Goldsmithny and catch the 1:30 bus from there to St John's Hall. A return was sixpence. Go down and watch the Pirates play.
yes,
Come out of there, go to Chagrin's for high tea, and then go to the English ring actors on the prom. Come back, the Burnman's bus would stop by Lloyd's Bank and get on and come home for less than 10 shillings. Oh, and a packet of fags. Yes.
Where was the slaughterhouse then?
Oh, at the back of our premises.
Right,
I started on the premises,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
How can you describe that process to us?
Now, what we used to do was, if we were going to slaughter an animal...
So you'd buy the animal from market, would
yeah,
you?
we used to mainly Elston Market. They was drove from Elston to Penzance, and at Marazion they would block off a lane the other side and that, and they'd try and filter a couple or three, whatever we had up at the back. Summertime, we used to keep them in the field. We had before we slaughter an animal, we'd bring the animal into the feeding pen, and we'd feed them on hay and water, just enough so that you're not being cruel to them and that. And when we slaughtered a meat, we would hang it up in the shop, and we wouldn't cut up that meat for about a couple of days.
So did you shoot the animal, or?
Oh yes, we had one of the first humane killers there was. It was issued by the RSPCA.
Right. Okay.
At the bottom of the hill, there was a carpenter shop, and then along the flat, about 100 yards away, was a blacksmith's. And as children, we were fascinated because the carpenter would be making wooden wheels on a hub, and two of the boys would carry them to the blacksmith, and he would beat a circle of iron and attach it to it and plunge it by the chute and let water come over it and seal it. And I would love to know if it's still there and what it's called. The great circular piece of granite that they pivoted the wheel into to tip the water over, and the steam flew.
When you were getting the crabs, how many crab pots would you have?
We worked 80 at one time.
And how many crab would you get?
Well, it depends really, it depends on the season, but quite often we get 4 or 5 crabs in a pot, you know, especially September. We used to have the hen crabs used to come crawling in then. And, and sometimes 3 lobsters in a pot, and they were quite valuable at that time.
So you'd be looking at maybe 50 in a day? Or
oh yes, easily 50 in a day, I think, yeah. you move your crab pots along each day from one area to another, so you're going over new ground all the time.
Yeah.
Of course, we've got 80 pots. We've got eight strings.
And where did you get the crab pots from?
Father used to make them. I used to help him make them.
Yeah.
They were withy pots in those days, withy and tamarisk. We used to make withy were the main part structure of the crab pot, and the necks were weaved with small withies. That was my job.
And how many people in Marazion would be crab fishing?
Then it was mainly Geoffrey Round and my father, George Chernow, from St Michael's Mount. Then he used to have a few part-timers who worked on the mount and used to go fishing from there. The Matthews family was mainly the ones, George Matthews and also John Matthews. He was the harbour master over there. He used to fish quite a bit there. They would do it as a sideline to help their wages out.
Yeah, I heard they used to often set out about 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yes, yeah, we used to walk 4 to 4:30 sometimes because of the tide. We were working the tide. We couldn't get out of the harbour. And we used to come in then and by about 9 o'clock, put the crabs and lobsters in the store pots, get the other boat ready for hobbling with the tourists.
Yeah.
So we had a long day when it was hobbling days. Yeah. In Prussia Cove, there was lots of little shacks which the old fishermen used through generations. Yeah, Father had one of them at one time. He also built one there out of gunpowder boxes. Lasted for many, many years, and that was taken down, I think, about 3 or 4 years ago. And we used to go down there sometimes of a Sunday when all the men had plenty of spider crabs, and all they used to have a good old boil up and a feed down on the cliff top. Yeah.
Because they've got something to boil crabs.
That's right, yes, yeah. We used to use it also for tying ropes and that sort of thing.
Oh, yes.
We used to have a fire there for that. Yeah, some of the families used to get around there for Sunday, and we have quite a picnic down there.
Do you remember on Easter, Good Friday, when they used to collect the shellfish?
Oh, the limpets and winkles, yes, yeah. Used to go down to Carnegie Beach.
Did you? Yes.
Yeah, and also down at Marazion here. And we've done it for generations, really.
Yes.
And
Do you know why it stopped?
I don't know why, really, no. Probably people got a bit better off at Easter time and went to buy fish from Penzance or somewhere from the fishermen.
Because they used to sell them, didn't they?
Especially the French. The French used to come across and pick winkles and take them and sell them to Harvey's over at Newlyn.
Just on Good Friday or throughout?
No, throughout.
Yes.
Yeah.
A little bit about the church in St Hilary Churchtown. And did you sing in the choir?
I sang with them for a few years. Then I took part in the broadcast. I was 12, 13 year old.
So the Bethlehem play, did that go on before it was broadcast? Did they have it every year anyway?
Yes, but he was a man called Philson Young, who used to work for the BBC in London. He used to come down regular. He was one of the only people that had a car. AC6, I'll never forget it. And he used to drive down. He used to stay at the vicarage across the road.
So he was the connection with the BBC?
He was the connection with the BBC. He said to Bernard Walk that I think myself this play would do well as a broadcast. And they would put it over landlines in they days. The back of the church was a massive batteries, all connected up for power. And
but no electricity in the church?
No, not in they days.
No?
Not in they days. And nor eating either.
And it went out live, did it?
Yeah, it was marvellous.
What, in the evening or the day?
Yeah,
or?
in the evening. They started off with the ringing of the bells. They had bell ringers. We had regular bell ringers up there, 6 bells. But it was recorded and it went out, I don't know, 10 or 12 times altogether.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then people asked for it back again.
Right. Whose idea was it to redo it?
Well, I don't know exactly.
Were you the only one in both broadcasts? Or were there others?
A lot of them died out. We had nearly all the new cast.
Right, okay.
You know, they came from all over the shop. I mean, I never once thought of Bill Mann being in the broadcast.
So what did you play in the first...
I was a shepherd boy.
All right. And in the last one?
In the second one, I was the main shepherd. I took the part of Nicky Peters.
When did it stop being done then, Sid?
I'm not exactly sure about that. I don't know exactly when.
But you weren't a shepherd boy when you got past 12 or...
Oh, no, because after that, we didn't do it anymore for a long spell.
Right.
Because it was on records.
Yeah,
it was recorded out and broadcasted. They had Bernard Walk, who was the vicar then. The BBC gave him a set of 12-inch records with the whole play on it,
Yeah.
Of course,
I wonder what happened to them.
I don't know. They were highly valuable. They would be nowadays.
So what was Bernard Walk like then? Was he a nice chap? Or?
Oh yeah, he really was. To me, he was outstanding. Like, he was very helpful in every way. Although his method of carrying out services didn't suit everybody, but as a man in himself, like, he was very helpful.
What do you mean you had all sorts of problems? Was that?
Well, they came and a lot of Londoners came down. They called them Kensite movement, I think it was, and they smashed up the church, tore the altars out, and one thing and another.
Why St. Hilary Church then? Was there a reason?
It was a bit high-churched, and they kicked up a fuss about it. And I can remember it because I was still going to school when it was done.
Mum from Marazion then?
Yes,
Yeah?
yep. Mum was born down Green Lane. She was James' family. And father, he was born at Penzance, but the whole of his family came to live in opposite the church. And from there, they all emigrated to America and Canada.
All but him?
Oh, he went out in 1908. Father went to, this is before I came into the world. He used to work in the quarry. That's another thing he could do on his part-time, blasting.
Yeah?
Yeah, he was registered for
explosives.
For explosives. And of course, he went out to Dundas Quarry, which is just outside Hamilton, because my cousins took me there when I went out. And then he moved out to Saskatchewan, out on the prairies, and he did well. That's where he picked up farm work there. Of course, eventually he came back. He decided that he would come back and marry Mother, because they were friends. She caught him before he went. And of course he came back in 1912. And Mother said no. She said, I'm not going to Canada. And she wouldn't. She said, if they build a bridge across, she said, I'll walk. But she wouldn't go. And of course, Father then was the only Collins left in this country.
All right.
Because all the rest had gone. Now this is where the thing is, this is true, John, and I didn't realise, we always thought it was one of Father's old tales, because he could tell a tale. The idea was that he would go back to Canada, and if they'd gone back, well, I wouldn't have been here, because they were going to go back to Canada on the Titanic. Yeah.
It started before the Second World War, and the Pennies were great carnival builders, because they worked with their hands, they built things, they were all artists. I mean, they all paint. At Christmas time, they realised that there was an old duck shooting boat, a very flat-bottomed boat that they had been using for carnival, and that it would make a very nice sleigh. So they built this sleigh around this flat-bottomed boat with the long-handled steering wheel like you see on old cartoon-type bath chairs. Party was known in the family, dressed up as Father Christmas, and he dressed his two younger sons, Comet and Hilary, up as reindeers. And in those days, people in the area were paid on Christmas Eve, and the shops stayed open for people to spend their money. And they took this sleigh to the top of Causeway Head, and it was downhill all the way, down Market Jew Street. And I understand that he tossed sweets out, which were, much more special than sweets are today, during this late
Christmas
night.
Eve
That's
evening.
That's right. The next year, they thought they could do the same down through Marazion. It wasn't quite the same because it was residential, but I think lots of people were aware of what might be happening. The following year was 1939, and the war had started. Hilary, by that time, had gone to Africa as a mining engineer. And so the sleigh sat in an outhouse at Trewin, which was the surgery in the house just a little bit further down the road. Comet was rather late coming back from the war, and so the first Christmas he was home was 1946. And Comet decided that it would be a great thing to get this sleigh out again and do much the same thing. So he got some of the younger people in Marazion, and in those days, of course, you dressed up with crepe paper and things like that. And they decided that they could give presents to the children. And basically, this is really still what happens.
Sure. Okay, and how did you meet your husband?
Well,
You haven't got to tell us.
No, I try and what to describe it as. Between Perrin Cross Roads and Falmouth Packet on a Sunday night, after church or chapel, everybody walked there.
Okay, now
That
I've
was
heard
the
this.
meeting.
I've heard this said. So can you just describe a bit more about that? That wherever you were, whether you were in Perranoothnow or Golsethny or St. Ives or whatever, you'd meet up at Perran.
Yeah. Boys used to come from further afield sometimes, and wasn't many of that cars, one or two.
Right.
And it was like Penzance Prom on a Sunday night up there.
So you promenade
Going up, walking up and down.
along the main road.
On the main road. Yeah, that's right.
And would you go as far as the Falmouth Packet? Or?
Oh yes, yeah.
And then back.
And then back, yeah. After church or chapel, whichever you went. And that was the meeting place.
Did you ever go to the prom in Penzance?
Very occasionally. Prom in Penzance was more of a Sunday night.
Right.
They used to go. The terrace was a Saturday night in Penzance.
Up and down the
Up
terrace.
and down the terrace, yeah.
Be a bit of chat with your mates
Oh,
and
yes,
the girls,
yes,
and a bit of flirting.
yes,
and
yeah. Yes, all a bit of going on. And on the terrace, you'd be on the terrace and you'd be a little gang of it. And policemen would come on, and you'd move you on, and you all had to move on, and you did. No problems, no troubles.
No.
But you couldn't walk hardly for people in the terrace.
And you got the bus into Penzance?
Yes, yeah. 11pence return.
Okay.
And we used to walk to Henver, out here where the turn is now for the roundabout.
Yeah, by top of Marazion.
That's right.
To catch the bus.
To save tuppence.
Right, okay.
Because you could catch it here. And with a bit of luck, if you had a return, that tuppence you saved, you could come back on that as well.
Right, okay.
So you was brought home to Golsethny.
Oh, right,
But you
okay.
had to walk from...
So you cheated the bus man, really?
That's right, that's right.
Well, Bermans came from Townsend, I think. And, well, it always just says, like Berman's bus, there's always room for one more. And another expression is standing in your own like the Mayor Market Jew. And that was because in the old chapel there, the mayor's seat was at the back and straight in front of a window.
Yeah.
And it was his expression, it was used a lot, he stands in his own way, like the Mayor Market Jew.
I've heard you talk about Alf Ramsey. What was his involvement with Marazion?
Yeah, well, he was stationed down in Marazion, I think, at the Godolphin. And, of course, all the Marazion Blues had gone to war. But there was this junior crowd, which was Jimmy Rodder and myself and then Michael Glasson. And we used to cycle around on bus to various places where we'd have a game. But anyway, Alf Ramsey got to know he got this team, and we were playing at the top of Marazion, right opposite the cemetery there, between the cemetery and Henford Farm. And Alf turned up with his team, and we had a bit of a bingo playing in this field, really, with no goalposts or anything, I don't think, because the football field had moved from the folly at the bottom of Marazion. There was always a bit of a laugh there. There was a referee, and he was always known as Slip-Along. The boys used to mob him, I don't know why, but anyway, I suppose it was when he went against Marazion Blues with a decision. But anyway, there used to be quite a few people that went to see the football, and then it moved out and moved up the town, and eventually moved to where it is now, where the floodlights are.
So Alf wasn't managing the Marazion team then, he got another team to play against you?
No, he got an army team to play against us,
right.
youngsters.
Right.
He was quite a nice guy to talk to.
Marazion used to have a fair.
Long Barn.
Long Barn?
I think so, they called it, yeah.
Why did they call it that?
Of course, a barn, which is a football headquarters or something.
Yeah.
It was but that was a barn. That was. In fact, James, one of the saying about the dairy farm, he was running that long barn, then, you know.
And they had a fair around there, so
yeah,
they
the
had
donkeys and stalls and all the rest of it, you know, poultry. You name it, yes, that used to take place.
Right.
I remember that.
What was going on in Marazion? Was there?
I remember a Methodist minister, I can see his face now, he had a magic lantern.
Right.
And down in the Sunday school there, he put a show on with this magic lantern. You know, that was something, that was.
Very good. Yeah.
You talk about cinemas and that. I'll give you an instance in entertainment and school. When I was at grammar school, what's the organist from Cornwall cinema?
Dudley Savage.
Yes, Dudley Savage. I think Harold Ramsey was. He went down to the Ritz, and he had an interview, and they signed him on there and then, and that's.
And how old was he then?
He couldn't be more in early teens. Because what started it is he used to stay away from school every week and that because he used to play the church organ at Cornwall.
Right. So if it was a funeral where he had to play the organ.
Organ, yeah.
And what about tea treat, Myra? Do you have tea treat?
Oh yes, we used to have tea treat, the chapel tea treat.
Right.
Yeah, third Saturday in June.
And were you allowed to go because you were a church woman? But
No, I didn't go to the tea treat, but they used to march through the village, band, the banner.
Yeah.
That was the highlights in their days. It's Saturday nights to go around to these tea treats. This is where you pick up your shiners.
Explain that term to me.
A boyfriend.
Yeah.
That's what it would be. We used to go to the mall.
Right.
We used to walk over to Curleen.
Yeah.
Prowless.
Yeah. And they'd all have a band playing.
Yeah, Curleen used to have two bands, and that was used to have St. Dennis up there, and that was a big thing in their days.
Yeah. Wow.
Every tea treat had a band, and then they would have the march through the village.
Okay.
Yeah, with the band, and the children with their walking sticks dressed up with flowers to carry. Used to all carry these flowers with their new hats and whatnot.
Posh stuff.
Oh yes, yeah, tea treat, that was a big thing. Always had a new dress for the tea treat. Yeah.
And then we were talking about Father Walk at St. Hilary.
Best man on God's earth. that
Really?
could be. He
Yeah.
was a man, he practiced what he preached. People might thought he was a bit strange in his religion type in the start.
Well, he was very high church, wasn't he?
Very high church. That's what the Kensites was against. Well, they were a group of people. And there was one or two from St. Hilary that were the leaders of them.
And they were called Kensites.
They used to call them the Kensites. Yeah, I think the Kensites is a name that's something from up the country.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure.
But he had a statue of the Virgin Mary and things, didn't he, outside
Yes,
the church, and
he
they
had-
objected.
Well, they tore. I can remember never saying about that. The day that church was tore up, we came out of school and walked through that way into the church, and the altar and everything was all broken up and all thrown outside. Oh, it was devastating. It was dreadful. And going in, because Snowry Avenue up there in the wall, I think the hole is still there. He had a place built where he had the Virgin Mary in a glass case, and that was smashed to pieces. Oh,
And these were local people, or I mean, some of them were local.
Some of them were local people. Yeah.
So what happened after that, Myra? Did he move on, or did he?
Well, he stayed there for lots of years, and then he went to Mafagissy.
Did you have a radio at home?
Yes, we had a radio.
Can you remember what was
Only
that?
one.
Only one.
Yeah.
Not one in every room. No. And what, on batteries, accumulators?
Yeah, or you had to take them out and be charged, go
Yeah.
up to the garage, up at Guzitney, Mr. Basher's. Yeah.
Do you remember when electricity came to?
I think it came to Perrin in 1928.
So that was quite an event.
Oh yes, lovely to have a kettle to boil and lights.
And what about the slab? You had that all the time, or?
Pretty well all the time until, I don't know, 1940 something. We had the slab taken out and a well stud put in.
What?
A well stud or an agger, they're the same thing.
Okay.
Only different names.
Never heard of well stood.
Yeah, well, it's like an agger,
Right.
only a different make.
Okay. So the same principle, though.
Yeah.
And Mum used that to cook on?
Yeah.
And what about wash day?
Well, in one of the outhouses we had a big boiler. You just light the fire underneath and have the hot water from that and wash them in a big bath and put them in the boiler to boil.
Did you go to a well for the water before?
No, before we had a big tank in the back.
Right, so it was rainwater.
Yes.
Did you have was there a well in the village at all to get?
I can't remember a well.
So everybody had a tank or something.
Yes, yes.
And what happened if the tank ran dry?
Well, we had to get water then from Trenow, from the Oddick going down Trenow.
Right, so at Trenow, down by the cove, there's
right.
an adit that runs out into the sea, and that was the fresh
I think water still runs down.
It does.
Because the cattle would have needed water too.
Oh yes, they used to bring water from Trenow home in big barrels on like a wagon, and that would be for the horses and that to drink.
Irons on the slab?
Yes.
Yeah.
Before electricity came, irons that used to put the heater in the fire, and then you'd take it out red hot and put it in the iron.
Because we used to have a circus. The circuses used to go up here, and a fair. Besides the Michaelmas fair, we used to have a fun fair. But the circuses, they used to come regular. And one night, Mr. Lady, as I say, Reggie Lady, he had what we called a Maui, where he used to keep his hay and straw. These here, that's what circus people were up there. And we'd gone to bed, and all of a sudden we heard this here rumpus outside. Of course, Dad opened the window, shouted out to him, only he said, there's a fire up in the man's, one of his ricks, that caught a light, you see. And he said, we come down for the fire engine.
So was there ever a fire engine in the fire engine?
No. Well, of course, Dad then, he knew exactly what to do because they had hose pipes in, scattered around, Okay. Well, of course, Dad took the hose up and so.
What about celebrations in Marazion then? Were there special days or feast days or?
It's funny, I only thought about that this morning. The biggest day in Marazion was Marazion Fair Day. And that took place just, where the surgery is, and the community hall. There used to be two fields there, two small fields. The top field used to have all the cheapjacks. And it would be, my gosh, they came from all over. Because the stalls then used to be on the green. That's Marazion Green, you see. That's how the sign is down there, Marazion Fair.
So was this before the war?
Oh yes, this was when I was still living in Marazion.
Oh right, okay.
Yes, before we left Marazion. And the bottom field, they used to have a flock of ponies come down from Bob and Moore, these wild ponies.
When did that die out?
It petered away, put it that way. But for years, it was one of the main events. There used to be 29th of September, Marazion Fair, and then they used to have one at Lower Quarter a week after. And of course, these are cheapjacks and what have you, they used to travel around with them.
Yeah. Was there much of a difference between the east end and the west end of Marazion?
We were top towners.
Right. Okay.
You see, top towners and bottom towners.
Yeah.
And of course, we used to say the dividing line then was, where Betty Creebo's living now, in Nevada House. Below that, they were, we always used to say we weren't friendly.
Was that the richer end then?
That was
bigger houses?
You've got it, yes, yeah. We up this end, we were the poorer. But there was never any friction,
No,
it's just
there was a difference.
There was a difference, yes, definitely.
And you were also saying another annual event was the feral cat.
Oh, the cat shoots.
Yes,
We did.
Well, they were just wild, I believe.
There were dozens of them. They were wild. Our Tiger Tim's mother, we caught that one. They were wild. And this thing came running out the tunnel over there. I've been over there, you know where the tunnel is. And this little cat came running out and tried to get down a drain hole. But there was a grate in there and the poor little thing was stuck down there. And of course all we children were all round there and afraid to touch it because it was spitting. So my sister went and got Aunt Abby and she came out with big gloves on and caught the little cat and we took it home and kept it. Her coal house, I believe it was, outside in the wash house. Anyway, we kept it and gradually we fed it and it tamed. It got tame and it had kittens.
And every year they'd have like certain things like the concert.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, well that was it in the boathouse. It is now the Island Restaurant. That was a boathouse then, and each year we'd get all the stools out, long wooden stools, and build up a stage at one end, and then all the children would give their turn, and then the adults would come along and do their turn, and the family from up in the castle and all the guests would come down. They always had quite a few guests over the Christmas period, and they would all come down.
Lovely.
we would do our little turns up on the stage.
And this happened every year.
Oh yes, But it's all gone.
There were cows on the mountain. They used to keep cows there.
Oh yes.
You remember that?
Yes. There were
and the dairy, of course.
Yeah. The thing I remember most was the pigeons. If you go all over on the mount, up amongst the rocks over on the western side, you'll see little tiny brick holes. In the rock. It's been put in there, and that was where the pigeons lived. And of course, the poults, the baby pigeons, and their eggs. All went up to make up the diet of the St. Albans, Well, you had to, there was no refrigeration or anything. That was fresh meat.
Yes.
Through the winter was the pigeons.
There are no pubs on the mount.
No, there was a pub.
Was there?
On the mount, yeah. When Mother was a little girl, and grandfather used to go over there to work sometimes. Sometimes he would be off in his fishing boats and all that sort of thing. But there was a pub there, and it was a St. Alban Arms. Ooh, God, I can't think of the name. It was Edward the Seventh, Sixth.
Queen Victoria's son, I expect.
Yeah, it was. I don't know which he was now. But anyway, is when he came to visit the island.
Yes.
Two of the boatmen were drunk. And the pub was closed immediately afterwards, and it was never reopened.
Really?
Yeah, the signpost is still sticking out there.
Yeah.
And it was hanging on this post that's sticking out from the building. But as I say, it was closed after Prince of Wales, as he was then.
Yes.
After his visit, as I say, two of the boatmen got drunk.
And every year you have a rent court, is that right?
Yes.
Yes. What happens there?
Well, we always had it in the old days. They used to, of course, come and actually pay their rent in cash, and that's the tradition. But we still have a very traditional lunch. We have the royal toast and all that sort of thing, and Lieutenant says grace and all that. So we have exactly the same traditional lunch we've always been. And I used to come to the Red Court luncheon just after the war when I left the Navy, and I wouldn't have thought in 1947, but in 2005, very roughly the same family as about.
And every year the estate has a rent court, doesn't it?
That's right.
Yes. What happens there?
Nowadays, it's simply that Lord St. Lebanon and the St. Alban family give the tenants a free lunch, and they come in and pay their rent. That goes back to when leases were on lives. Most old leases had the King or the Prince of Wales, and then you usually had the youngest member of your family. The youngest member eventually becomes older, you see. And the rent court was that you could produce the body, you could show that you were still alive. I mean, that's just a
I think that was the general practice in Cornwall, wasn't it? That's how people did
But now,
secure tenancies.
Of course, the tenants come in on a certain day, and they have drinks beforehand, and they have...
I can imagine it must be quite a party, really.
Oh yes, yes. I think this last time was something like 60.
Yes, yes. It's quite an operation, really, the Mount, isn't it?
Oh, it is. You've got gardeners to contend with, and you've got guides, and you've got the castle staff, cleaners, and that sort of stuff, and you've got the cafe, gift shop, and you've got the maintenance man. So there's a lot of trades, and you've got the boatman, of course.
Yes.
Most important.
How many are there?
The boatmen, 3, and that's 3 full-time, and then you've got the casual ones that come in as and when required, and you also got the hobblers. The hobblers are independent operators, and we give them the right to land passengers on the island. They own the boat and they operate the boat, but we give them the right to land people on the island, and also grant them a mooring.
Do they have the same sort of boats as the mount boats?
Same,
They do.
virtually the same.
And you call them hobblers?
They call them hobblers, yes.
Did you get a lot of tourists in those?
Yes, yes. Yeah. I remember once we met Clark Gable. We took Clark Gable over.
Oh, what?
Yeah, I was only a young lad. You know.
Butler.
How old was I then? I was 17 then. I never used to smoke, but Father used to smoke, and he offered him a cigarette, and he offered me one as well. I refused, but Father smoked the cigarette, and he coughed quite a lot at the time. They were these Belgian Cheroots sort of cigarettes, quite strong. Yeah.
And your father was a very precise man.
He got up every morning at 6:30. And in our house, the first routine that happened was that your shoes were outside the door of your bedroom. So that Mum's would be there and mine would be there and Brenda's would be somewhere else. And he'd take the shoes downstairs, because we had a downstairs bit with the boiler and where the coal was kept, and a boot and shoe room. And he cleaned all our shoes, put them back outside the bedroom door, had his breakfast, and then went up to the castle. And he left precisely at 7:25 every morning, and he was up there in 4.5 minutes. And I know that because my husband and I tried time and again to beat it, and we couldn't. 7 minutes was the least we could do. He did it in 4.5 minutes from our house to the castle.
And he was away all day then?
No, not necessarily. Now the morning would be obviously getting the breakfast trays ready, because he had to get the trays ready. The food would come from the kitchen, but he would get the trays ready, and he would take the tray to Lord St. Leven's room, and that was his job, to actually go and wake his lordship, make sure that the clothes for the day were right, and see that everything was okay, and make sure that he was awake before he left the room. That was important. The lady's maid used to do the same thing, Lady St. Leven. She had her own lady's maid who did all her laundry and all her private things, and she looked after her dressing table. So the housemaids, although they went in to clean, did not touch the personal things. They were done by the lady's maid. Then Daddy and the boys would clean the silver, and then he'd clean up and wash his hands and everything, and then he'd put on his day jacket and go down and have a meeting with Lady St. Leven, which could last as long as it took, if you know what I mean, and they would discuss business. And he'd get the orders for the day and make sure that the boats were ordered if she wanted to go or his lordship wanted to go. And then at some time as well, he would also go up to his lordship's study and speak to him. So he was in touch. They both had separate studies in different parts of the castle, and they both were responsible for their own things. So her ladyship, for example, had a big involvement with the Red Cross and places like the Cheshire Home and, the Catholic Church. So she was very much into things of her own, and Dad would go and have to speak to her about that. Then lunchtime. Now they used to have lunch, but it was only a light lunch, but it was always in the dining room. It was always laid up properly, but it wasn't such a big fussy meal as the evening dinner. That was the special one for the day, but certainly they'd have a light lunch. And then after the light lunch was all cleared away, he'd pop down to the house, have a cup of tea with my mum, talk to her. He'd obviously eaten himself in the staff hall, and he'd have 40 winks, great believer in 40 winks, and it was really only 40 winks. Then he'd be up like a lark and out in his garden, and he absolutely loved his garden. Because he had an indoor job, I think that was his salvation. There was 2 or 3 hours in the garden most afternoons, and then he'd go back up to the castle again at about 6 o'clock. Or perhaps it was earlier, 5:45, 5:45, he'd be gone again, and he'd be back home at 9. And then when he went up, it was all to do with serving dinner. This was the big meal, and it wouldn't matter if there were only 2 of them. There's a beautiful silver display for the centre of the table that had lovely little filigree silver baskets hanging on it, always filled with things like almonds and other bits and pieces. And he would make sure that everything was just so.
And they would dress for dinner and...
Yes, I can't remember what they dressed in, but yes, they would tidy up for dinner. I mean, if they had house guests there, they'd dress more, and they would always come, and he'd sit at one end and she'd sit at the other, and always at two different ends of this beautiful long table. And they'd be served by Daddy and the footman, and then it would all be cleared up, and Dad would come down for the night to our house.
Obviously, the trust between the Lord and the butler had to be total, didn't it?
There was so much trust between them that even the present Lord thinks of my father as being a wonderful person. There was so much respect for him. I mean, he was a valued servant.
They were very nervous that the Germans would land a landing party from a submarine. There were 2 platoons of soldiers living on the island. They lived at what was originally a laundry, it's now the cafe. And they had 3 machine gun posts. The Germans never bombed them, but they did machine gun the beach. The postman on the way back to the mine had to hide behind Chapel Rock because they were shooting at him. But the reason they didn't bomb so much is because the German foreign minister Ron Ribbentrop was going to live there if they won the war. He was overheard when he was driving in Cornwall telling his friend that he was going to live there.
Was Marazion ever bombed or ever...
Yeah, got a machine gun.
Did it?
Yes.
Yeah.
We were at school,
Yeah.
and I think at the time it was an air raid on, warning on, and we'd gone out into the classroom.
Yeah.
And Fokker Wolf, I think it was a fighter bomber, went in, it did some damage at St.Ives, and on the way back, it strafed, machine gunned a number of farmers working in the fields. It was harvest time, I think. And the council houses up at the top, the back row, and a Mrs. Jenkin and a Mrs. Richards got injured by flying glass at the time, not by the bullets.
No.
Yeah.
Marazion was shot up with Messerschmitts. They came over at sea level and shot up the top end of the town. And there was, I think it was a Mrs. Jenkin who was expecting a baby. She got hit. She was not seriously hurt, but she was hit. She was out in the garden, in the council houses this was, and she was hanging out the clothes when these damn planes come over and machined all the front of Marazion.
Around about 1942 that the Germans machine gunned the council houses and the school. Yeah, we were down at the Methodist chapel, so we were out of it.
Yes.
But Hemfer Close, they got shot up there at the council houses there, and Mrs. Richards and Mrs. Jenkins got injured with flying glass, etc. Yeah.
Did they?
And at the school, a friend of mine, Gerald Hicks, and my brother Gilbert, it was their last day at school.
Oh, yes.
They were leaving school and they were sent up into the school field to cut the grass on the cricket pitch.
Yeah.
When they were machine gunned and they went running for the hedge.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so they must have frightened the life out of them, I would have thought.
Your grandfather, he was a farmer as well.
Yes.
I mean, he was born during Queen Victoria's reign. He was a...
I can tell you when he was born. I'll show you this.
Oh, look, all written down. Excellent.
He was born in 1849.
Crikey. So he lived to be nearly 100.
96, I think he was when he died. 49. During the war, he used to sit in their kitchen with a big table and have the newspaper spread out in front of him, read the newspaper. And then he would say, Mother, he said, that man called Hitler is no good. He's going to make trouble. And that was before the war started.
So he spotted that one.
He spotted that.
So,
and then during the war, we had blackouts put up to our windows. And he had, of course, his window was a small one, and he had a blackout put up. And one mother who used to go in to see him in the morning, she used to say, you've got the blackout pulled back. Yes, he said, I like to see that little star twinkling up there.
the process of death and...
That's right, and they used to leave, it used to be walking funerals then, really.
Right, okay.
From Alaman and Relubus and that, if they went to Snoory Church, which they had quite a good congregation at Snoory Church, and he used to walk from the house to the...
And carry the coffin, or...?
He used to
horse and
carry that, and even, well, he had a horse-drawn hearse in Penzance.
How has undertaking changed?
Well, it changed a lot over the years, because when a funeral came in, if it came in 10 o'clock at night, we'd work all night to make the coffin, like, to get it there the next morning for the people. Of course, there wasn't any chapel or rest time. Everybody was kept in the house.
So they always stayed at the house?
Stayed in the house. People insisted on take the coffin out. They wouldn't bring the person down over the stairs. And you just imagine getting a 6-foot coffin up the winding stairs.
I was going to ask you that, yeah.
Some places it was impossible, and yet I suspect a lot of people know they used to pick up the boards between the beams and put the coffin up through.
All right, you've done that before, have you?
Yes, oh yes, in the beginning. Stairs and that.
And there'd be a local lady do all the laying out.
Yeah, we had several people. There was always a local midwife or anything, like a Mrs. Kneebone in Marazion used to go and do it, and then a Mrs. Tredray was just needed it for us. Then later on, if it was a man, Father myself used to lay them out, like, But we was always brought up in it. People said, how could you do that? But we was brought up in it as children, and we was always in it. Like
part of the job.
Yeah, part of the job. Our father said never, you can have a joke about it sometimes, but there's one little story where he used to tell people, was he went in this old people he knew, and she said, Eddie, Jimmy has worked all his life very hard and saved his money, and I'd like you to put the 12 gold sovereigns in the cover. That was his wish. So Father says, no problem. So went downstairs and got the sovereigns and went up. He thought it was an awful waste, so he left a cheque and took the sovereigns. Yeah.
For the cheque in the coffin, to count the money?
He never, but I meant they used to tell people that. Yeah.
Very good.
I can always remember it. And remember going up the steps by the Guelder and somebody saying, war has been declared. Well, Father's duties changed considerably from those in the past. His duties seemed so arranged that he spent all his time on call. That meant the police station in the centre of the town, Father normally attired in uniform trousers, and in those days they used to wear the old high-neck tunics, but with a shirt on, sat in the front room or went gardening. Eventually in later life he even went sailing in these police trousers, but he was always ready to be called out. The great thing about the police station was it is in the centre of the town, it's next to the church, and very quickly the police station became the centre of activity. But it was also our home. So you can imagine that if people reported something, they came to the front door, knocked on the door, and whilst we were all sitting around huddled in front of a stove, listening to the radio in the dining room, Father would say, everybody out, this is the interview room. So we would have to go out into the kitchen. If you listened long enough, you knew what everybody came about. And as a young boy, I became...
I mean, how much crime was there? Were there robberies and burglaries? And
No. There was very little crime. One day I was sitting there at lunchtime, and Father and the sergeant brought a fellow in for pinching wire from an allotment. And the chap wasn't admitting it, but it was quite expensive stuff that he'd come in with. And Father and the sergeant wanted to go back up to the allotment to get some evidence. And eventually he solved the case by the footprint taken by Plaster Paris. But in the meantime, they didn't quite know what to do with this 1920 stone farm worker. And so the sergeant said, Arthur, he said, you've got a boy out there, haven't you? He said, yes. He said, how old is he? He said, well, he's 15. He said, how big is he? He said, 15 stone. Right, he said. So he said to this prisoner, and I can see it to this day, sit in that chair, and if you move, that 15-year-old will pin you to it.
And he did. He stayed there.
He stayed there. And they went out and carried on the investigation.
Wonderful.
Well, I don't think that would conform with the Police Criminal Evidence Act. But
where was the nearest sergeant, John?
the nearest sergeant was at Penzance, and in those days, up until 1947, the Penzance borough operated from the centre of the town. But his sergeant operated from the top of the Eastern Green. So we were what was known as the county policeman, and the town policeman were at Penzance. So the sergeant operated from Penzance, father operated from Marazion, there was a policeman at St. Hilary, there was a policeman at Crowley's.
I worked in Mitchell's, the drapers in Penzance, and they had beautiful clothes there, and we were all allowed to buy our clothes cost price.
Really? Could you remember how much?
I bought a coat for 2 guineas, but it should have been 3.
That's a big saving.
Yeah, and it was a marlback, and that's a good tailor-made. I don't think they do them now, but it was in those days.
So how long did you work there then, Meryl?
I served my time, and I was there 4 years.
And when you were in the draper shop, your training, what were you trained in doing?
We weren't allowed to serve for 3 years. We had to go through every department, and we would spend 6 months in every department. And then when we'd finished the round, we'd start all over again until our 3 years were up.
How many departments was that?
Well, there was a hosiery, underclothing, gowns, coats, hats, different ones, you know.
Yeah. So that was a real apprenticeship then, wasn't it?
Oh, yes. Yeah. You weren't allowed to serve. Of course, the assistants was lovely for them because they could pull everything out, and you saw everything that the shop had.
Yeah.
And then we had to come on and put them all away. And then I worked for Johnny Fortnight at St. Ives Station. Do you know what a Johnny Fortnight is?
I've no idea.
A man that goes out collecting money every fortnight, and you buy your stuff from sort of warehouse place. They bring a selection.
Yes.
And you would choose what you wanted, and then they used to pay so much a week.
Right.
And somebody else would go around and collect it. Well, I did the office bit of that, you know, when they...
And Johnny Fortnight being the person collecting every fortnight?
Yes.
Every fortnight?
Yes, yeah.
And that's why they were called?
Yeah.
I want to know.
Where did you go to school?
I was secondary school, but I never went very much because I had to stay home to work. Now, I'll tell you now another story if you want to know more. I used to have to come home from school, have some tea. Tea was short at times. You know, there wasn't very much to eat. Might be just a piece of bread. And go down the orchard and dig around apple trees.
When you were 6?
When I was 6, these apple trees now were gone too old, very old. And I'd dig around the apple trees till he come home from St.Ives, and then get a rope, put a rope up to the tree, and then we used to pull them over. The next night I come home from school, I had to cut that up, landsaw. Landsaws they did. Well, no bow saws, no chainsaws, it was a landsaw. And then when we cleared the trees out, got the trees all gradually cleared, it might have took a few weeks and all together. I had to go from one end of that there half-acre garden meadow now, start shoveling them, just turn it all rough, turn it all rough. Because he was fairly clean with the apple trees all in, and then he did a few brambles got in, and we had to dig out first. And when I got to 7 now, I was made to plough with a cob and a single plough.
Really?
Yes.
One you could hold it.
The predominant memory I have of Marazion is actually the feeling of it, which I still have. No matter when you come back to Cornwall, you come over Ludgvan Leas and you get that sort of buzz. There's the bay, there's the mount. You come over Marazion Bridge, even if you've been working every day, and you never lose that feeling that this is a fairly special place. Visitors say, oh, about the mount, oh, well, you see it every day, so you must get used to it. The answer is you never do.